All right, let's talk about one of Korea's most beloved dishes, Samgyeopsal. We're going to peel back the layers on this one because the story of how grilled pork belly went from a food of necessity to an absolute cultural icon is just incredible. So let's dig in. So we're starting with what looks like a pretty simple question, right? But the answer, well, it's this complex recipe of war, economics, and a massive shift in an entire nation's taste. The journey is way more surprising than you think. To really get a sense of how important this dish is, just look at this number. Back in 2015, the average person in South Korea ate 6 kilograms of just samgyeopsal. And to put that into perspective, if you look at all the meat someone eats in a year, we're talking about 47 kilograms, this one single cut, samgyeopsal, makes up almost 13% of that. That is a huge slice of the pie for just one dish. And here's where the story takes its first big twist. Because, and you might find this hard to believe, Koreans weren't always huge pork fans. Nope, not even close. For centuries, beef was king. It was precious, it was rare, it was that special, once-in-a-blue-moon kind of food. Pork, on the other hand, well, pork was kind of the backup plan. So this brings us to the real heart of the mystery. What on earth happened? What could possibly cause an entire country's palate to do a complete 180? Well, the answer isn't in some old cookbook. It's written in the pages of history. And to really get it, we have to look back at a really painful but also really pivotal moment in modern Korean history. This is where the story of Samgyeopsal really begins. Okay, so the Korean War, it just devastated the country. And, critically, it wiped out most of the cattle population. Now, these cows weren't just for eating. They were absolutely essential for farming. So to protect the few that were left, the government made a huge strategic call. They decided to actively shift the nation's diet. They started pushing pig and chicken farming hard. This wasn't some gradual change. This was a full-on government-led plan. And wow, did it work. I mean, look at these numbers. By 1970, just 2 decades later, pork had already overtaken beef, making up more than half of all meat eaten. Fast forward to 1990, and it's almost at 60%. Pork had officially become the people's meat. So pork is now the country's favorite meat, right? The stage is perfectly set for our hero, Samgyeopsal, to walk in and steal the show. And what's pretty wild is that Samgyeopsal, as we know it, is actually a pretty modern thing. The name itself only pops up in documents around the 1930s. And that's right around the time new pig breeds were introduced from Japan, breeds that were known for having these perfect layers of fat and meat. But its journey to superstardom really took off in the 80s. And then it got supercharged by a huge economic event. In 1997, the market for imported pork was opened up, and it was like the floodgates just burst open for cheap imported pork belly. And we're not talking about just any kind of pork. Get this. Since that market opened up, more than 45% of all the pork brought into Korea has been samgyeopsal. All of a sudden, it was everywhere, and it was super affordable. And what happens when something delicious becomes super cheap? Well, people eat a lot more of it. Just look at this climb. In the year 2000, it was about 3.8 kilos per person. By 2015, 6 kilos. Samgyeopsal wasn't just a food anymore. It was a full-blown cultural phenomenon. So, okay, when you step back and look at the whole story, this journey from a wartime necessity to this beloved soul food, what does it all really tell us about Korea? Well, it shows us this really unique food culture. See, pork is number 1 today, but that's because of these big historical and political decisions. But at the same time, that deep cultural love for beef, that special occasion food, is still there. It never really went away. And that makes Korea's meat habits pretty different from other countries in the region. And that's why, really, a single sizzling plate of samgyeopsal is so much more than dinner. It's literally a plate full of history. You can taste the hardship of war, the incredible drive of industrialization, and, the prosperity that came after all of it. But, the story doesn't end here. Nothing stays on top forever, right? The Korean dinner table is always changing, and there are already new contenders entering the ring. I mean, think about it. You've got the huge popularity of chicken, you've got affordable imported beef becoming more common, plus all the new health trends. The whole food scene is shifting again. So we'll leave you with this question to chew on. 50 years from now, what food do you think will be sitting at the center of the Korean dinner table?